Now, after our safety briefing, we will do a walkthrough of the area, and that will be done with tri-field meters. Once again, this is not something we really want to bring in all kinds of different equipment on. We're just looking for general hits on the natural tri-field meters. After this, you go back, you'll go to your team system, record any findings, especially electromagnetic fields, temperature variations, take photographs, investigate the event, mark the event on the map. There's nothing wrong with being a little skeptical. If you can replicate events, you can try to do that. Look for natural causes. After it's done, you need to have a debriefing. Now this can, usually you can do it on site, but most of the time it's really better to do it at another location, be it a restaurant or a coffee shop or something. What the debriefing is making sure that everyone that experienced anything or acquired any sort of data, that it's all recorded in your paperwork. You can also talk to your team members. What do you think about this said event? We had this happen to this person and whatnot. Because when this is done, there is going to be a debriefing done by your state coordinator. And he's basically going to know, is this place haunted? Give me your honest opinions. Do you think it's really worth going to and whatnot? And it's important to give him that information. If it's a waste of time, he needs to know that. We don't want to waste any more money or our manpower going back to a place that's obviously lame and has nothing happening. So after that's done, we have our debriefing. You submit the data to the state coordinator, and our next step is ready to take place. Okay, and the third step in the process is the skeptical inquiry. Now, basically the skeptical inquiry is performed by a group within SGHA called SHIELD. And this is a group of investigators that is committed to finding natural causes for reported ghost activity. The focus of this approach is that the anomalous phenomena are not always seen as being inexplicable in terms of current sciences, but requiring normal explanations. Now, the skeptical inquiry begins with SHIELD receiving the map and photographs from the initial survey and the ghost hunt. Along with the map, the SHIELD team is given a basic description of the events as they've been recorded. And they will also review any video that's shot, including the witness interviews and anything shot by the ghost hunters. Now, before they go to the location, what they're going to do is they're going to develop hypotheses based on the available data and attempt to eliminate normal explanations. They actually get to the site, that's when they're going to actually test their hypotheses. The one requirement for the skeptical survey is that if they're attempting to debunk a particular thing, say there was an unusual light seen in a room or something, it's required that they replicate that and record the replication. And this just prevents any conflict between the SHIELD investigators and the people doing the ghost hunt in the initial survey. Now, the final step in Phase 1 is the case review. Now, after the SHIELD investigation is completed, all the data from the initial survey, the ghost hunt, and the skeptical inquiry are turned over to the state coordinator. Now, what they will do is there's a flow chart that they will go through to basically determine what's going on at this location. We look at everything. We're looking at data analysis, the opinions of the investigators, unusual photos or video, the same thing with electromagnetic fields, the level of activity, the potential for the site for research, interview analysis, all of that. What we do is we're going to basically narrow things down to 3 options. The first option we have after reviewing the Phase 1 investigation, we can close it, which means this place isn't worth us wasting our time going to. It's just not that haunted. We close it, that's it, we do not go back, and if we do a report, it will be one saying this place, we don't believe it's haunted. The second thing we can do is we can put pending further review on this case. Now what that means is we can either launch another ghost hunt at a future date or another SHIELD investigation at a future date. We haven't closed it, we're going to look at it, but we're not going to recommend it for Phase 2. The third and final option, of course, is to proceed to Phase 2. And what Phase 2 is just a more detailed investigation. But we do not want to expend the manpower and everything for Phase 2 unless the place is really haunted. So this is kind of what a Phase 1 really is. We're trying to determine, is this place worth expending resources and time to look at? Now, Phase 2 is the SGHA investigation, and it differs a lot from Phase 1, mainly because the composition of the team is composed of not only ghost hunters but also SHIELD members. The simplest way to put a Phase 2 is it's a skeptical ghost hunt and possibly extended surveillance of a haunted location. And what's going on generally is it works very similar to what our ghost hunt was. We'll have a base of operations, we'll place instrumentation and cameras, and we'll implement other things that we didn't do before. For example, power to the location must be turned off at the breaker box. We do not want any power in the building if we can get away with it at all. Sometimes this is not possible, especially in restaurants where you have things like walk-in coolers and things like that that cannot be turned off. But to the most possible, we want to eliminate any type of electromagnetic fields that are generated by power lines and whatnot. It's just another scientific protocol. Another thing is, people need to be monitored through the entire thing, and we're talking monitoring their location and what they're doing. When this is done, typically with the ghost hunt, for example, we have freedom of movement. During the Phase 2, when you're moving from one area to another, you have to physically call on the radio and request permission to move from one place to another with the base camp. That way they know where every single person is inside the location. And this is what, if we get weird noises or whatnot, we can immediately determine, is there anybody in that area that could be making that type of noise. It's another scientific control protocol. There's also very strict regulations saying that a single investigator should never be left alone, period. And the point of that, once again, is to help with a protocol to eliminate hoaxing or faking of evidence or whatnot. If there's always two, and that's not saying the skeptics are going to jump us and say, you know, because there's two, they can fake it just as much as one. But people are more likely to freak out when it's a single investigator, and we want the two there for not only for safety purposes, but it helps verify experiences if both people are experiencing it, not just the single person. Now, what happens when we do the surveillance is we're going to split the investigators up into teams, and we're actually going to set up a rotation schedule. Now, we do allow time for breaks and whatnot, but generally you rotate your teams in through the positions. And another thing is, if you're using stationary positions, and this is where the teams are not roaming, they're assigned to a particular area, and they do not move from that area. This is another big difference between the investigation of a Phase 2 and the Phase 1. In the Phase 2, we don't move. We're not roaming. We're set in specific areas. It's important to move those teams around. If you have one team in an area for 3 hours, boredom is going to be a very major problem. So you do want to cycle your teams around. But you want to do that in a way that you're not moving everyone at once. It should be staggered. Otherwise, you know, while you're moving people around, you know, Murphy's Law, something will happen, and, you know, information gets botched because no one's in there to get any type of data. Once again, we'll be using SGHA Form 001 to record anything that you get. And there's different types of surveillance that we can do. Generally, when we do surveillances on the Phase 2, we want to be there as long as we possibly can. Sometimes that's simply an overnight trip. Other times, for example, when we have mobile labs and things, or facilities available, we can try to extend this for days, weeks, months even, if we can financially afford to do so. So this is really where the big difference is. A Phase 2 can last anything from a couple of days to several months. It simply depends on how big the op actually is and how much time we're willing financially and time, personnel, manpower to complete the operation. Once again, when it's done, it comes back, and once again there's a case review. And once again, everything is looked at, and we decide what to do. And pretty much we have the same options. We can close it saying, okay, it's not haunted. We can recommend it for yet another Phase 1 ghost hunt, or yet another Phase 2 investigation. Or we can pass it on to Phase 3, which is research. Now, Phase 3 is pretty simple. Phase 3 is the basis of what SGHA is about. It's more about composing hypotheses. We're making a research plan, and then we're doing experimental tests and then analyzing the results of those tests. Now those could be anything. We could be experimenting with ions, for example, or we could be experimenting with different types of trigger tests or things of that nature.